Greetings and welcome. Today we're going to be painting this Moonlit lighthouse scene right here, and it and I, we've had a bit of a complicated relationship. When I first painted this scene right here, I wasn't in love with it. I thought it was good. I thought it was a solid lesson, but I didn't want to put it up. And that's strange. Generally if I finish a lesson, I'm like, it is a good lesson. I want to put it up. I'm proud of it. This one, a little different. I kind of equate it to a record that grows on you. I don't know about you, but when I put on a record and I love it immediately, generally I kind of grow tired of it within a fairly short period of time. But if I put on something and I'm not really sure how I feel about it, I kind of have to live with it, mull it over, I find those stick with me. I feel like those become my favorite records. And this painting is very much that. I didn't love it in the beginning, but the more time I spend with it, the more I appreciated it. And today, we're doing a cut-up of it. Now, for those of you who would like help with the drawing process, there's a digital sketch of this to help you over up on Patreon. It has the grid, you can print it off, you can transfer it, you can do all that stuff. But also, there's the hour-long lesson up over on Patreon as well with everything. You get to see it from start to finish, and it's useful, it's a good time. You can also find all of these other hour-long lessons, not that glass of water, up on Patreon as well. Every month I add 2 to the $4 level, I add 4 to the $8 level. They never go away, and you can always revisit and enjoy them. But that said, let's jump into today's hour-long lesson. That is a cut-up. I never get the title of these right on video. Let's do it. So we are going to begin here with a titanium white, a Mars black, and some primary blue. I'm using a large square-headed brush because it can hold a lot of paint, and it's great for those initial applications. Here I'm dipping the top of it in water, not the entirety of it. I don't want to mess with the binding and the glue inside. So we're just getting that top area damp. Now I'm going to grab some primary blue, going to apply that to the sky. And as you can see, it's very transparent, it's very see-through. That's not what we want. So we need to A, desaturate it, and B, thicken it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to dip my brush in water again because I like to have it almost always damp. I'm going to grab some titanium white on one side of my brush. Going to grab a little bit of Mars black on the other. The Mars black is a much stronger pigment, but we do want this to be a night sky so it can be a little bit darker. Then I'm going to throw those two into our mixture here. Now we'll have something much more desaturated and much more thick. So I'm going to put that brush down and I'm going to switch over to this smaller round-headed brush. Going to put some water on that. We'll grab some titanium white. We'll grab a little bit of our primary blue. We'll mix them down here, create something a little bit brighter. Then I'm going to look and try to find the outlines of my clouds that I drew in initially. I'm going to work this around the edge of them. Then, in a circular motion with my brush, as you can see, I'm blending the back part inwards. So I just wanted to illuminate the cloud. Now I'm going to incorporate some additional detail into these clouds because they're not two-dimensional. They're going to have extra sides that protrude and also receive light. So that's what we're doing right here. There we are. Quite nice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of black, a little bit of blue. Now I have a much darker pigment. When our brush is wet, and I can work in other clouds, different types of clouds. These ones are darker, so I'm starting farther away from our moon, and they're horizontal. That's also very important. We want different types of clouds. It'll make it so much more interesting. I'm making the initial application here fairly wet, so if it's too dark or I don't necessarily like it, it's okay because it isn't as noticeable. Right now it's almost like we're sketching with paint. it's in a very malleable state. If we like it, we can go back over it. Then we can grab that highlighted pigment that we had before and highlight areas, like under areas, that might get a little bit more light. This will make them look a lot more three-dimensional. So I'm doing it underneath the ones above the moon, and I'll add it on top of the pieces that are below it. Taking the larger square-headed brush that we used before, taking a lot of primary blue, and just like before, I'm starting here by just working in a little bit of a base layer. Very saturated, very vibrant. Then I'll grab a little bit of Mars black, a little bit of titanium white. I'm going to darken the back area. It's a little bit similar to the cloud, as you can see, which is nice. If it's a little bit too gray, we can wipe that off. We can grab some additional primary blue, rework that on. We're going to get a little bit of burnt umber. Here I have a little bit of a tube, Liquitex Basics. Applying it to my palette. There we are. Now I'm going to grab some of that burnt umber. I'm going to layer that into our ground here, our sand. And I'm even going to bring it out a little bit into where our water is. And I'm doing this so that we can layer the water on top of it. But I'm also going to grab some titanium white, not too much, a little bit of Mars black. We're going to desaturate and thicken the burnt umber just like we do with the primary blue. I'm going to get a little bit more Mars black for this area because it won't be receiving as much light. We're going to jump back into the water now. We're going to do so with the larger square-headed brush. I'm going to grab some primary blue, apply that there. Going to get my brush very watery, get a little bit of titanium white. Blend that. We're going to fix the edge first. And now we're going to blend it onto the land. I'm going to get even more water, so it's very transparent. And now we blend them together. Now I'm going to grab my smaller square-headed brush, get some titanium white paint, mix it up with some primary blue. There we are. I'm going to begin working in some highlights to the water that's coming in. Moving them about a little bit. As I move higher up, I'm becoming more horizontal with my strokes. And when I get up to here, they should be almost straight with the horizon. But we have a slight bend into the way our water's moving into the land. Now, let's take that same smaller brush here. Let's get some titanium white. Let's do a reflection from the moon. So I'm going back and forth in a Z-like pattern with the smaller end of my square-headed brush right underneath our moon. You can also do this dabbing motion in the middle, and you'll get a bit more of a stark application than you would if you were to blend it all. Because when you make a stroke, you blend the pigments much more so than when you do a tapping motion. It's a little trick. Then I'm going to take my smaller round-headed brush, get some titanium white, get some primary blue, a little more titanium white. And we can go back in and add some additional highlights to the clouds we think will be receiving the most light. I'm only applying this on the sides that are next to the moon, and we're building up depth. I'm also going to take that smaller round-headed brush and throw in a couple of stars. Not too many. Normally we take this brush, we peel back the bristles, we launch some stars at the canvas. I don't want that many stars in this painting. The sky's already interesting enough. And then we can throw those down into the water. Really magical. Now I'm going to begin working in our foreground, specifically with our rock structure right here. Now it's a lot closer to us, it's a lot farther away from the moonlight and the kind of atmospheric coloring. So it's going to be much more of a natural brown and a bit of a darker pigment as well. Generally when you get farther away from your background, you want to increase the contrast of your pigments, make them a little bit more saturated, make them a little bit more innately colored. So I'm going to begin here by taking some Mars Black, finding the areas that I think will be a little bit darker. Areas that aren't going to be receiving light from the moon. This is going to look very messy at the start, and that's okay. But from there, I'm going to take some of this burnt umber, get a little bit of titanium white to thicken it up. I'm going to draw this on the areas that I think are going to be receiving a lot of light. And then we can blend it back into the darker area. But it doesn't have to be a soft blend, because we're working on rock, which is innately a very hard surface, so we don't have to worry about that too much. Then we can take some of the mixed colors and move them into the areas that might look like they might get some light, but not too much and not too little. The in-between areas. See? And we're building up this nice mixture of all of them. Here I'm going to go back to the areas where the moonlight's really hitting and reapply some highlights, because they will have probably dried a little bit transparent and a little bit dark. Trying to create as many little details as possible. We could switch over to the smaller square-headed brush, but that's a lot easier to control, and I kind of like the spontaneity that using a larger brush presents in this area and in rock. Now let's begin working on some of the grass and foliage that's up here. Now, a lot of the grass in this, if far away, would be very blue, but because we're a little bit closer, it'll be a little bit more green. So we'll grab some primary yellow here. Grab some primary blue. Primary blue is a lot stronger than primary yellow, so if you want a neutral green, you'll need to use a lot more yellow than blue. But we don't want too much of a neutral green. We might want something a little bit more blue in it, because this is a night scene. So here, that's what I'm grabbing to begin with. If you ask me, this is looking a little bit bright for what we want to do. See that? So what we'll do is we'll desaturate it and we'll darken it. Grab some Mars Black. A little bit more green. Green and black will also, or rather yellow and black will also make a green. It'll be a bit more of an olivey color, a little bit less desaturated. So it'll be a bit warmer, but it's nice. I'll grab some titanium white, mix that in, make a bit of a brighter version. We'll apply that to the edge where the moonlight's going to be hitting it. I'll also apply a little bit down here, which we can darken up if we want, but I needed it to be thick to go on top of what we were working on. And now I'm going to switch to my medium-sized square-headed brush and begin on the actual lighthouse. So we'll begin with a gray, and then we can decide whether we want to darken or lighten it after our first application, and how we'll go about doing so. I can still see my lighthouse, the drawing of it rather, so I'm just working around those lines. But if you lost it, you can go back to the start of the video and redraw that in now. I'm going to be using my smaller round-headed brush, going to ensure that it is very wet in this clean water. Going to grab some titanium white paint with nothing else. I'm going to go in between our lighthouse, pick an area we want to be very bright, and apply our pigment. Now I can already tell I'm going to want to make this more of a yellow, so I'm going to take that yellow. I know what we said earlier about doing the yellow after, but I'm looking at it and I can tell it's going to need it. So we'll take some yellow, we'll throw that in there, and then I'm going to want to blend the edges, but it's very watery. It won't blend as well as I need it to right now. So I'm going to instead shine some light. Just like that. You see how this application is much brighter than the one we just previously used? It's because we're now working on a much lighter base. There we are. Can have this streaming out really far if you'd like. There are some openings in the light. Gives it a nice little look there. Again, we're going to make that middle area a little bit brighter. You can have additional pieces shooting out light as well if you'd like. Now I'm going to take my smaller square-headed brush, ensure that it is damp, grab some Mars Black, some burnt umber, and I'm going to work in a little bit of a fence here. I'm starting with some little posts, which will get smaller as we get into the distance, and larger as we get into the foreground. I'm doing 2 pieces in between. You don't have to though. That requires a bit of a fine stroke. You can do 1. And in the background I'm actually just doing 1 because visually they'll probably blend together. But in the foreground here, making it a little bit more noticeable. Now I'm going to switch over to the smaller round-headed brush, just so we get very fine detail. You can also use the corner of the square-headed brush, but I like to show you guys that. You can use multiple mediums to achieve the same thing. If you don't have everything I have, that's okay. You can make it work. And when you're doing art, there are 100 ways to do the same thing. It's all about finding the way you like it, the mediums you like, and expressing yourself with them. Hey there, it's Ryan O'Rourke. I truly hope you enjoyed today's little extra video. It was essentially a cut-up version of one of the many hour-long lessons which we offer over on patreon.com. Over there you'll also find digital sketches of the 10-minute painting lessons, digital sketches of these hour-long painting lessons, and a bunch of reference photos as well. So if any of that interests you, or if you just want to support the channel, go over there and check it out. It is a pleasure to make these long form videos, and I love to share them with all of you. So thank you so much for watching. I will see you next Saturday with a new video, and above all, as always, stay creative.